Baal and Dagon, the ancient gods of the Bible. During ancient times, a god known as Baal was worshipped throughout Canaan and Phoenicia. During the Judges period, the practice of Baal worship penetrated Jewish religious life. Judges 3:7, New American Standard Bible. So the sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they forgot the Lord their God, and served the Baals and the Asheroth. The practice of Baal worship became widespread in Israel during the reign of Ahab. The method of Baal worship also affected Judah. 2 Chronicles 28, 1-4. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 16 years. He did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord as his father David had done, but he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. He also made cast metal images for the Baals. Furthermore, he burned incense in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and burned his sons in fire, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord had driven out from the sons of Israel. He sacrificed and burned incense on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. It's important to remember that the plural form of the word Baal is Baalim, which means Lord. In addition to being considered a fertility god, Baal was also thought to help the earth produce crops and humans produce offspring. Various locales emphasized one or another of his attributes and designed particular sects of Baalism. Numbers 25:3 depicts Baal of Peor, while Judges 8:33 depicts Baal Berith. The word's etymology shows that Baal was viewed as the landlord of a specific location, thereby restricting its use to people who were no longer drifters, but had settled down. These local Baals were thought to be in control of agriculture, creatures, and humanity's fertility. It was crucial to winning their favor, especially in places like Pal, where there are few natural streams or springs and rainfall is unpredictable. This led to the adoption of extreme practices. Baal eventually ascended to the position of preeminent deity in the region. Part of this process, according to some researchers, can be traced back to the Ugaritic scriptures. Baal is identified as the son of Dagon. Dagon is one of the Bible's most ancient gods. We will cover this deity later in the video. Scriptures of Baal depict him wearing a helmet decorated with bull's horns, representing fertility and strength. He carries a club or mace in one hand, probably meaning thunder, and a spear embellished with leaves in the other, possibly representing both lightning and vegetation. In Aramean sculptures, Baal is depicted riding a bull. Anath, referred to as the Virgin Anath, was Baal's spouse and sister and shared many of his escapades. The evidence indicates that Baal and other Canaanite deities were worshipped in Egypt. However, they didn't become a severe threat to the religion of the Egyptians. The situation was different in Israel, where, through the process of syncretism, the worship of Yahweh was profoundly influenced and threatened by alien elements from the Baal cults. This was due to two main factors. First, the Israelites did not drive out the Canaanites, but intermarried with them, thus raising the problem of the interrelationship between Yahweh and Baal. Second, Yahweh had given Israel a significant victory over the Canaanites, and his supremacy was unquestioned. Baal was considered the most powerful of all gods, eclipsing El, who was seen as rather weak and ineffective. In various battles, Baal defeated Yam, the god of the sea, and Mot, the god of death and the underworld. Baal's sisters/consorts were Ashtoreth, a fertility goddess associated with the stars, and Anath, a goddess of love and war. Baal worship was rooted in sensuality and involved ritualistic prostitution in the temples. At times, appeasing Baal required human sacrifice, usually the firstborn of the one making the sacrifice. Jeremiah 19:5. And have built the high place of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, a thing which I did not command nor speak of, nor did it ever enter my mind. Baal's priests worshipped their deity with riotous rites that featured ecstatic shouts and self-inflicted harm. 1 Kings 18:28. So they cried out with a loud voice and cut themselves according to their custom, with swords and lances, until blood gushed out on them. Before the Hebrews entered the Promised Land, the Lord God forewarned against glorifying Canaan's gods, but Israel bent to idolism anyway. Deuteronomy 6:14-15. You shall not follow other gods, any of the gods of the people who surround you, for the Lord your God who is in the midst of you is a jealous God. So follow him, or else the anger of the Lord your God will be kindled against you, and he will wipe you off the face of the earth. During the reign of Ahab and Jezebel, at the height of Baal worship in Israel, God directly confronted the paganism through his prophet Elijah. First, God showed that he, not Baal, controlled the rain by sending a drought lasting 3.5 years. Elijah then went public. He set up a meeting with King Ahab. 3 years had passed since Elijah declared that there would be no rain. The stage was set for a showdown on Mount Carmel between 850 Baal prophets and one God prophet. How long will you waver between two opinions? Elijah challenged the audience. If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. Here was Elijah's dare. Let's have a competition. Let the God who is God respond with fire from heaven. That was a good test, and Baal, the storm god, should be able to send down some lightning. Elijah gave them every advantage before mocking their futile efforts. Baal's prophets spent hours pleading, shouting, and cutting themselves, but he didn't respond. Then Elijah prepared the sacrifice before asking God to show the people his glory. Fire fell and consumed the sacrifice, the water, and the altar as soon as he said his prayer. People fell to their knees yelling, "The Lord, he is God! The Lord is God!" They couldn't help but notice that God was alive and well. But the Lord God wasn't done yet. He reactivated the rain. Elijah prayed 7 times in a row before the rain began to fall. Elijah, drenched, dashed down the mountain. He demonstrated that God is alive and well. God is alive and well. You can display it both privately and publicly in your life. Finally, in Matthew 12:27, Jesus refers to Satan as Beelzebub, a reference to the Philistine god Baal-zebub. Matthew 12:27. And if by Beelzebub I cast out the demons, by who do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. Jesus continues his response to the Pharisees' charge that he cast out demons by Beelzebub with a second short parable. Or again, how can anyone enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can rob his house. The Baalim of the Old Testament were nothing more than demons masquerading as gods, and all idolatry is ultimately devil worship. 1 Corinthians 10:20. I imply that what pagan sacrifice they offer to demons, and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. However, there was a god considered more ancient than Baal. His name was Dagon. Who was Dagon? The Bible describes Dagon, also known as Dagon, as one of the oldest deities in Mesopotamia, with evidence dating back to 3000 BC. He was represented as a half-man, half-fish creature. Dagon was regarded as the father of all other gods, so he was widely worshipped in what we call the cradle of civilization, where farming is thought to have first started, also the area some call the Fertile Crescent. Dagon's statue looks like a gigantic man, and some representations of him have him looking like a merman, which is a human with fish features below the waist. Some scholars have referred to him as a fish god, which makes sense given his association with the Philistines and their location along the coast. In the Bible, the Philistines continue to worship Dagon during the time of Judges and during the reign of Samuel and Saul. As a biblical connection, ancient texts from the region connect Dagon as the father of Baal, another false god highlighted throughout later Old Testament history. During the Judges period, the practice of Baal worship entered Jewish religious life. During the reign of Ahab, the practice of worshipping Baal grew across Israel, and it was also prevalent in Judah. The method of worshipping Baal had an impact on both nations. Dagon's son, Baal, was worshipped in various ways across the entire land. Dagon was similar to many other idols in that he personified natural forces that had supposedly produced all things. Throughout history, right into the days that we now live, humans have always been fascinated with demon-driven gods to do what looks extraordinary. This temptation hasn't been limited to the heathen that do not know God, but has also crept into the hearts of those who once loved and understood the God that made the seen or unseen world. This longing to seek gods often stems from greed, rebellion, or a soul that is too impatient and feels God is too slow for the supernatural change he desires. Psalms 16, 2-5. I said to the Lord, "You are my Lord. I have nothing besides you. As for the saints who are on the earth, they are the majestic ones. All my delight is in them. The pains of those who have acquired another god will be multiplied. I will not pour out their drink offerings of blood, nor will I take their names upon my lips. The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You support my lot." What happened to Dagon in the Bible? There are two primary passages in the Old Testament that refer to Dagon. The story can be found in Judges chapter 16 as a component of the Samson narrative. God chose Samson to be one of the deliverers or judges, and he used his renowned power to triumph over Philistines at every stage of the conflict. The Philistines could not defeat him in combat, so they targeted his Achilles heel, his relationship with foreign women. The famed Delilah coaxed Samson's secret confession out of him and made him cut off his hair, leading him to be captive by the Philistines. As they worshipped Dagon and had a big party, they decided to humiliate Samson by putting out his eyes and making him work as an enslaved person. Clearly, this was part of their worship of Dagon. The nations went to war in polytheistic cultures. It was also understood that their gods fought, and the Old Testament confirms this in many passages with Israel and other cultures. With Samson, the Philistines were making a statement. Due to the capture of Samson, they believed Dagon had beaten Jehovah, Samson's god, and therefore Dagon was more potent than the God of Israel. Judges 16:25-30. Now when they were in high spirits, they said, "Call for Samson so that he may amuse us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he entertained them. They made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who held him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the roof of the house rests, so that I may lean against them." Now the house was full of men and women. All the Philistine lords were there, and on the flat roof were about 3,000 men and women, who looked on while Samson was entertaining them. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, please remember me and please strengthen me just this one time. O God, and let me take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Samson took hold of the 2 middle support pillars on which the house rested and braced himself against them, one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he stretched out with all his might, collapsing the support pillars, and the house fell on the lords and on all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. Samson's plea to God to help him destroy the Philistines makes sense. God's assistance was not about Samson so much as proving which god was more potent. 1 Samuel 5 is where we find the next instance of Dagon being dealt with. The sons of Eli, the priests, and commander of Israel were wicked religious men. Despite the fact that the Ark of the Covenant went into battle with Israel against the Philistines, God handed Israel a defeat as punishment. The Philistines succeeded in stealing the Ark of the Covenant from its previous owner. In a manner identical to that which has occurred with Samson, the Philistines brought the Ark into the temple of one of their city-states, Ashdod. 1 Samuel 5, 1-7, Amplified Bible. Then the Philistines took the Ark of God and they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. They took the Ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it beside the image of Dagon, their chief idol. When the people of Ashdod got up early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen on his face on the ground before the Ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and returned him to his place. But when they got up early the next morning, behold, Dagon had again fallen on his face on the ground before the Ark of the Lord, and his head and both palms of his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk portion of the idol of Dagon was left on him. This is the reason neither the priests of Dagon nor any who enter Dagon's house step on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. Then the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he caused them to be dumbfounded and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. When the men of Ashdod saw what had happened, they said, "The Ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is heavy on us and on Dagon, our God." How was Dagon worshipped? Dagon was worshipped in temples that could be found all over Mesopotamia. According to the Bible, the cities of Beth Dagon, Gaza, and Ashdod were home to some of the most important temples. He was worshipped by offering offerings and participating in feasts. His temple is destroyed. His image is laid prostrate before the Ark of God with his hands and face cut off, demonstrating that he is powerless to resist the God of the Israelites. There is a need to be cautious about what we let into our lives. Whether or not the Israelites worshipped Dagon is not mentioned in the Bible. However, we know they dabbled with Dagon's gods, Baal and Asherah, so we can assume that there is a little bit of Dagon thrown in there. It is essential to be highly cautious when dealing with innocuous things, as they can be very insidious.